The sound was a sharp, arrogant scratch. Gregory Shaw, his $3,000 Brioni tie a perfect dim knot, signed the divorce papers with a flourish. He laughed, a dry, dismissive sound that filled the sterile 50th floor conference room at his law firm, Sullivan and Cromwell. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Serafina," he sneered, pushing the papers across the mahogany table. He believed he had won. He believed she was ruined. He had no idea that waiting for her downstairs wasn't a taxi, but a $4 million pearl-white Koenigsegg. And the man holding the door was worth more than his entire firm. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the view of Central Park into a gray, weeping watercolor. Inside the conference room, the air was thick with the scent of old money leather and palpable disdain. Gregory Shaw looked every inch the man who ruled this particular universe. His suit was custom-made, his watch a Patek Philippe, and his expression one of bored triumph. Across from him sat his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife Serafina. To Gregory she looked small, faded. She wore a simple beige sheath dress that he found particularly drab. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her face, which he once found beautiful, was pale and impassive. She was accompanied by a lawyer, a mousy woman named Ms. Chen, whom Greg's own shark, Arthur Klein, had run circles around for weeks. "Gregory, if you've signed, then we just need Serafina's signature," Arthur said, his voice smooth as silk. Greg leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Of course, let's get this over with. I have a 2:00 tea time at Winged Foot, assuming the rain lets up." He watched as Serafina picked up the pen. He had won. He had won completely. The penthouse on Park Avenue, the Hamptons estate, the art collection, all of it remained his. Serafina, who had come into this marriage with nothing, would leave with what he'd generously offered, a one-time lump sum payment that to him was little more than taxi money. It was in his mind a masterful victory. He'd spent the last year building a case that she was unstable, depressed, and incapable of managing her own affairs, let alone any significant portion of his assets. His affair with Tiffany, a bright-eyed and ambitious paralegal from his own office, was quietly swept under the rug as a symptom of a broken marriage. He felt a bubble of laughter rise in his chest again. Serafina. She was pretty once, but she was soft. She had no iron in her. She'd been a quantitative analyst at Goldman Sachs when they met a job he found cute but ultimately pointless. He had convinced her to quit to support his career. His rise to senior partner at one of the most powerful law firms in the world was proof that he'd made the right choice. She'd become the perfect hostess, the perfect accessory. And now that accessory was worn out. "Sarah, darling," he said, using the pet name he knew she hated, "do try and be smart with that. It's more money than your little family in Arizona has ever seen. Maybe you can get a nice studio in, I don't know, Queens?" Arthur Klein winced slightly. It was unnecessarily cruel. Ms. Chen's head snapped up, a flash of anger in her eyes. Serafina, however, did not react. Her hand was perfectly steady. She signed the name she hadn't used in 15 years, Serafina Navarro. She capped the pen, placing it precisely parallel to the folder. "We're done then," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. It was flat, clear, and cold. "Indeed," Greg scoffed. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Serafina." She stood. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. You were wonderful." "Ms. Navarro," the mousy lawyer replied, a small, strange smile playing on her lips. "The pleasure was all mine." Serafina turned and walked out of the conference room. She didn't look back. Greg let out a sigh of relief. "Well, Arthur, that's that. Send me the bill." He felt a sudden childish urge to see her final pathetic exit. He wanted to watch her shuffle out of the grand lobby, to see her hail a cab in the rain. That final image would be the perfect end to his victory. "I'll be right back," he said, grabbing his briefcase. "Just want to make sure she finds the right door." He followed her, striding quickly down the plush carpeted hallway past the reception desk with its enormous floral arrangement. He caught her just as the elevator doors were closing. He didn't get in. He just watched her face blank and serene as the polished brass doors slid shut. He took the next elevator down, a smug smile on his face. He stepped out into the cavernous marble and glass lobby of the GM building. The doorman, a man named Patrick, whom Greg had never bothered to learn the name of, was rushing to the curb. Greg stepped out from under the awning, feeling the cold mist on his face. He looked left toward the taxi stand. No Serafina. He looked right, and his world stopped. Parked directly in front of the building in the no-standing zone that not even Greg Shaw dared to use was a car that didn't seem real. It was a pearl-white Koenigsegg Gemera, a $4 million four-seater megacar. Its dihedral synchro-helix doors were lifting up and outward like the wings of some futuristic bird. And holding one of them open was a man. He was tall, dressed not in a suit but in a simple dark cashmere hoodie and jeans that Greg instinctively knew cost more than his entire outfit. The man's profile was sharp, intense, and globally recognizable. It was Henry Alistair Rousseau, the reclusive French-American tech mogul, the man whose company Rousseau Energetics was single-handedly remaking the global power grid. A man worth not millions but billions. A man who, as Greg knew with a sickening jolt, was the single largest client of Sullivan & Cromwell's Mergers and Acquisitions Department. Greg watched frozen as Serafina walked calmly to the car. Henry Rousseau smiled at her, a genuine warm smile. He didn't just hold the door. He touched her elbow, guiding her in with a tenderness that made Greg's stomach clench. "Sarah," Rousseau's voice carried clear and concise. "Is it done?" "It's done," Serafina replied, sliding into the supple leather seat. "Good," Rousseau said. "The jet's waiting at Teterboro. We're late for the Zurich meeting." Greg stumbled forward, his briefcase slipping from his numb fingers and hitting the wet pavement with a slap. "Sarah," he said her name, but it came out as a strangled croak. Serafina paused. She looked at him. Through the open window, her face was no longer a blank mask. A slow, brilliant, devastating smile spread across her features. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated victory. "Goodbye, Gregory," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "Thank you for the taxi money." The door shut with a silent, pressurized thunk. The hybrid engine, which had been silent, let out a low, predatory growl. The car pulled seamlessly into the Fifth Avenue traffic, disappearing in a spray of gray mist. Gregory Shaw stood on the sidewalk, his $5,000 suit soaking his mouth open. His lawyer, Arthur Klein, came up behind him holding an umbrella. "Mr. Shaw, sir. Are you... all right. Did you see that? That was Henry Rousseau." Greg couldn't speak. He just pointed his hand, trembling. Arthur looked at the departing car, then at his client's white, shocked face. He cleared his throat, a sudden, terrible understanding dawning. "Oh," Arthur said softly. "Oh, dear." To understand the depth of Serafina's escape, you had to understand the construction of her prison. It wasn't built of iron bars, but of whispered insults, social obligations, and calculated isolation. 15 years ago, Serafina Navarro was a name whispered with a kind of awe in the analyst pits at Goldman Sachs. She was a quant prodigy from Tucson, a University of Chicago graduate with a mind that saw numbers not as figures, but as a language. Her predictive models on emerging markets were becoming the stuff of legend. She was quiet and tense, and on the fast track to a partnership. Gregory Shaw was an ambitious, charismatic senior associate at Sullivan & Cromwell, the law firm that handled Goldman's biggest accounts. He saw her at a dreary interfirm networking event. She was in a corner sketching an algorithm on a cocktail napkin. He was intrigued by her beauty, but he was captivated by her brilliance. Or so he said. The truth Serafina later realized was that her brilliance threatened him. Their courtship was a whirlwind. He was worldly charming and persuasive. He painted a picture of a life she'd never imagined. "Sarah, you're wasting that brain on derivatives," he'd murmur over dinner at Balthazar. "I'm going to be a senior partner. I need someone smart by my side, not just a wife, a partner. We can build an empire. You won't have to work. You'll have a life." She fell for it. She was tired of the 100-hour work weeks. She was in love. She quit her job. They married. The first 5 years were a blur of his success. He made partner. They moved into the Park Avenue penthouse. They bought the Sagaponack estate in the Hamptons. Serafina, true to her nature, threw herself into this new role. She managed their finances, oversaw the renovations, and learned the complex, unspoken rules of New York's old money society. But the partner he promised her was a lie. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a high-functioning, beautiful piece of decoration. The dehumanization was subtle at first. "Darling, let's not bore our guests with your thoughts on the energy market," he'd say at a dinner party, cutting her off with a genial smile. "Why don't you tell them about the hydrangeas in the Hamptons?" "Serafina, that's Rothko, not Rauschenberg," he'd correct her loudly at a museum gala. "It's so endearing how you get them mixed up. Don't embarrass yourself." "What would you know about leveraged buyouts, sweetie?" he'd ask when she tried to discuss his work. "Just make sure the catering for the fundraiser is perfect. That's your department." He systematically cut her off from her old life. Her friends from Goldman were boring and grubby. Her family in Arizona was unrefined. He gave her a generous allowance for the house and her clothes paid from a joint account he monitored daily. She was in effect trapped. She hadn't earned her own salary in a decade. She was surrounded by wealth but owned nothing. She was Mrs. Gregory Shaw, an asset. And in his eyes she was depreciating. He had grown bored of her quiet intelligence and yearned for someone who, like his new paralegal, Tiffany was young, adoring, and uncomplicated. Someone who looked at him like he was a god, not like he was a math problem she'd already solved. Serafina wasn't depressed, as he'd told his lawyers. She was dormant. She was a volcano covered in snow waiting. She had poured all her frustrated, restless energy into managing his life, his homes, and his social calendar with the same ruthless efficiency she'd once applied to the stock market. She knew where every dollar was. She knew his passwords. She knew his secrets. She knew, for instance, that his genius legal strategies were often built on insecure bluster. She knew his rock-solid portfolio was dangerously over-leveraged in volatile markets. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her that he would never let her go if he thought she was anything but broken. He would fight not because he loved her, but because his narcissism couldn't stand the idea of her leaving and succeeding. He had to be the one to discard her. So for 2 years, Serafina began to fade. She stopped offering opinions. She forgot names at parties. She dressed in the bland beige colors he preferred. She let him believe she was crumbling under the pressure of his world. She let him believe she was a casualty. She was, in fact, building a weapon. The breaking point wasn't the discovery of his affair with Tiffany. Serafina had known about that for 6 months. She'd found the Chase Sapphire credit card statement for a business trip to St. Bart's that she knew she hadn't planned. It was a cliché, and frankly, it bored her. The catalyst, the moment the dormant volcano decided to erupt, happened at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the annual Patrons Gala, the second biggest event of the year after the Met Gala. This year, Serafina had been the co-chair of the organizing committee. It was her project. She had spent a year navigating the treacherous waters of New York's wealthiest egos, securing donations and planning an event that was by all accounts flawless. Her greatest coup was securing a massive last-minute anonymous donation of $5 million. It had saved the new Egyptian wing expansion. Gregory, of course, was taking all the credit. "My wife is the face, but I do the heavy lifting," he'd boomed to a reporter from the New York Times. "You have to know which arms to twist. I got on the phone with a few key clients and, well, the results speak for themselves." Serafina stood beside him, her smile as fixed as the diamonds on her neck. Later that evening, a Page Six style reporter, a notoriously sharp man named Bryce Vinter, cornered Serafina by the Temple of Dender. "Mrs. Shaw, you look stunning," he gushed. "Everyone's saying you pulled this gala from the brink. What's your secret?" Before Serafina could answer, Greg materialized, placing a heavy, possessive hand on her waist. Oh, Sarah, she's the secret weapon. He laughed, his voice just a little too loud. She tastes all the canapes to make sure they're perfect. Isn't that right, sweetie? He winked at the reporter. She's got a real talent for domestic things. Bryce Venter's smile tightened. He knew an insult when he heard one. Seraphina's face did not change. If you'll excuse us, she said, extricating herself from Greg's grip. I need to check on the dessert course. The ride home in the back of their chauffeured Bentley was silent. The silence was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. As they stepped into their penthouse, Greg loosened his tie. God, these things are a bore, but I think we cemented the donation for my new corner office. Sullivan was impressed. You humiliated me, Greg, Seraphina said, her voice quiet. He stopped, genuinely surprised. What? By giving you credit for the food, darling. It was a joke. You're so sensitive. You used to have a sense of humor. You took credit for my work. That $5 million donation. You had nothing to do with it. Greg's face hardened. He dropped the charming facade. And what if I did? Who do you think allows you to play party planner with the richest people in the world? Who pays for the dress on your back? It's my name, my reputation. We are a team, Seraphina, and I am the captain. You seem to be forgetting that. I am not on your team, Greg. I am on your payroll, and you've just reminded me how little you pay. He stared at her, his eyes cold. This was new. This was not the broken, faded woman he'd been carefully curating. What's gotten into you? He sneered. Is it because I've been spending time with Tiffany? He wanted a reaction. He wanted tears. He wanted her to beg. Seraphina just looked at him. Tiffany is a symptom, Greg. You are the disease. He slapped her. It wasn't a hard slap, but it was the first time he'd ever laid a hand on her. It was a sharp, stinging crack that echoed in the vast, silent apartment. Seraphina didn't flinch. She just raised a hand to her cheek. She felt the sting, but beneath it she felt a profound, clarifying cold. Thank you, she said. What? He stammered, taken aback. Thank you for making this easy. She turned and walked to the guest room. She locked the door. The slap was the final period on a sentence she had been writing for 2 years. Greg, enraged and confused, went to his study. He poured a Macallan 25. He was furious. How dare she? He needed to put her back in her box. He remembered something Tiffany had mentioned. He went to Seraphina's desk, a delicate antique piece he'd bought her where her laptop sat. It was the one she used for household accounts and garden club emails. He opened it. He'd had Tiffany, who was clever with computers, install a keylogger on it months ago. He wanted to see if she was talking to a divorce lawyer. He pulled up the records. He scrolled past emails to caterers online shopping at Bergdorf's seating charts for the gala. Then he stopped. He saw her browser history. It wasn't self-help sites. It was a string of encrypted forums. It was sites about quantum computing, seed funding, and AI heuristics. He saw file transfers to a secure server in Switzerland. He saw references to something called the Phoenix Protocol. He didn't understand 90% of what he was looking at, but he understood that it was complex. It was secret. He felt a cold spike of fear. Not fear for her, but fear of her. This was the woman he'd been calling stupid. He marched back to the guest room and banged on the door. Seraphina, open this door. What is Phoenix Protocol? What the hell have you been doing on that laptop? There was no answer. He heard the faint, rapid click, click, click of typing from inside. He banged again, harder. Seraphina, you are my wife. You don't get to have secrets from me. The typing stopped. Her voice came muffled but clear from the other side of the door. You're right, Greg, I don't. That's why I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. My lawyer will be in touch. He was stunned. Her lawyer. She was filing. You can't, he yelled. You have nothing. I will ruin you. I will cut you off without a cent. You'll be back in that desert dump in a month. The line he'd been feeding himself for years. The reply from behind the door was the last thing he ever expected. Gregory, she said. "What?" he spat. "Shut up." For 2 years, Serafina's household laptop had been her covert operations center. While Greg was at the office, and later while he was working late with Tiffany, Serafina was not managing their social lives. She was reclaiming her own. It started as a game, a way to keep her mind sharp. She'd begun playing with market algorithms again just to see if she still could. Using a VPN encrypted servers and the anonymous handle S. Navarro, she started posting some of her predictive models on high-level invite-only tech and finance forums. Her models weren't just good, they were revolutionary. She wasn't just using standard market data. She was a quant, and she saw patterns everywhere. She built an algorithm that cross-referenced global shipping manifests, satellite-tracked weather patterns, and social media sentiment analysis to predict commodity futures with 98% accuracy. She called it the Phoenix Protocol, an algorithm that could predict the rebirth of an asset from what appeared to be its ashes. It was in essence a digital version of herself. Her handle, S. Navarro, became an underground legend. Small cutting-edge tech firms and boutique hedge funds began contacting her, offering consulting fees for her insights. At first she was terrified. Greg monitored their finances, but she was meticulous. She established a shell corporation in Delaware, Navarro Systems, using her long-expired passport and her parents' address in Tucson. The payments were routed through a Swiss bank account, the same one she'd used her household allowance to open, citing a surprise European vacation for Greg that never materialized. The money piled up, first thousands, then hundreds of thousands. The $5 million donation to the Met, that was her. She'd liquidated the profits from her first major algorithm test, a perfectly timed short sell on a coffee bean conglomerate she'd predicted would fail, and donated it. It was a test. Could she move that much money without Greg noticing? He hadn't. He'd just assumed it was one of his clients and had taken the credit. That was the moment she knew her plan would work. After the slap, the Phoenix Protocol went from a secret project to an exit strategy. She knew Greg's playbook. He would try to paint her as unstable, vindictive, and stupid. He would use her depression against her. He would use his high-powered lawyers to bury her emotions and drain her of money she didn't have. So she let him. She hired Ms. Chen, a brilliant lawyer from a small, unassuming firm. Ms. Chen wasn't a high-finance divorce shark. Her specialty was intellectual property law. Greg and Arthur Klein saw her as a pathetic pro bono-level lightweight. They never bothered to check her background. They assumed Serafina had hired her because she was cheap. They were right. Ms. Chen was cheap. In fact, she was working for free. She was an old classmate of Serafina's from the University of Chicago, and she was doing it for the sheer, unadulterated pleasure of seeing Serafina win. The entire divorce negotiation was a performance. "My client is distraught," Ms. Chen would say, her voice trembling with manufactured weakness. She is not well. She is not. She just wants this to be over. She is terrified of Mr. Shaw, she'd whisper in a sidebar with the mediator. She will agree to almost anything to be free. Greg and Arthur Klein lapped it up. They were sharks who smelled blood. They offered the paltry, insulting lump sum. "Ms. Navarro accepts," Ms. Chen had replied, looking down at her hands. Greg had laughed. He couldn't believe how easy it was. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, so convinced of Serafina's weakness, that he never once did a proper asset search on her. Why would he? She was just a housewife. He never looked for Navarro Systems. He never looked for the Swiss bank account. He never looked for the portfolio of patents for predictive AI already filed and approved. He was too busy celebrating his win. He was too busy laughing. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't a man. It was an opportunity. And that opportunity had a name: Henry Alastair Rousseau. Rousseau was a different breed of predator from Greg. He wasn't a lawyer who puffed his chest. He was a quiet, restless visionary who consumed data the way other people breathed air. He'd made his first billion in renewable energy technology, Rousseau Energetics, by the age of 30, and his current obsession was predictive AI. Specifically, he was obsessed with finding the mind behind S. Navarro. The algorithms S. Navarro was posting on encrypted forums were not just for the stock market. They were solving complex logistical problems. S. Navarro had in one post anonymously solved an energy distribution problem that Rousseau's own team of PhDs from MIT and Caltech had been stuck on for 8 months. Rousseau, a man who trusted code more than people, put his best cybersecurity team on it. "Find S. Navarro," he'd ordered. "I don't care what it costs. I want to hire them." It took his team 3 months. They tracked the digital footprint, peeling back layers of encryption and VPNs. Finally, they hit a wall. The IP address. It wasn't a tech hub in Silicon Valley or a university in Beijing. It was a private residential IP address registered to a penthouse on Park Avenue, an apartment belonging to a Mr. Gregory Shaw. Rousseau was confused. He knew of Gregory Shaw. He was the blowhard lawyer his firm Sullivan and Cromwell sometimes forced him to deal with. He despised him. But the data didn't lie. Rousseau arranged a meeting, a private dinner at Per Se. The pretense was a potential merger his firm was considering. Greg, smelling billable hours and a chance to impress a titan, was ecstatic. "And bring your wife," Rousseau's assistant had added. "Mr. Rousseau finds formal dinners so dull." Greg thought it was a charming quirk. He insisted Serafina come. "Wear the blue dress, Sarah, and try to look interested." The dinner was a disaster from Greg's perspective. Rousseau wasn't talking about mergers. He was talking about quantum entanglement and decoherence rates. Greg was completely lost. He blustered, trying to steer the conversation. "Well, Henry, in terms of the law, the regulatory hurdles for this kind of tech are—" Rousseau ignored him, his piercing gray eyes fixed on Serafina, who had been silent all night. "Your husband, Mrs. Shaw. He is S. Navarro." Greg laughed. What is that, a new scotch?" Serafina set her wine glass down. She looked at Henry Rousseau. Her mind was racing. This was it, the end game. "No," Serafina said, her voice quiet but firm. "He isn't." Greg was about to make another joke when Serafina continued, speaking directly to Rousseau. "And you're miscalculating the decoherence rate. Your model assumes a static environment. You need to account for quantum jitter in your matrix. Your algorithm is collapsing because it's too rigid." The table went silent. Greg's face went purple. "Serafina, be quiet. You don't know what you're—" Henry Rousseau held up a hand, silencing Greg without even looking at him. He was staring at Serafina with an expression of profound electric shock. "Jitter," Rousseau repeated. "Of course. It's the micro-fluctuations. How would you stabilize it?" "You don't," Serafina said. "You integrate the jitter. You use it as a random variable to strengthen the prediction, not fight it. It's what I call the Phoenix Protocol." Henry Alistair Rousseau stared at her for a full 10 seconds. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a laugh of scorn like Greg's. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated delight. "Mrs. Shaw," he said finally, "you are S. Navarro." "Yes," she said. "I have been trying to find you for 6 months. I was going to offer you a $10 million signing bonus and a blank check for your own research division." Greg, who had been listening to this exchange as if it were in a foreign language, finally processed the number. $10 million, Sarah. What is he? But Henry continued, his eyes never leaving Serafina's. "I see now that a job is not what you need." He looked at Greg, his gaze turning to ice. "Mr. Shaw, I believe you are in the wrong meeting. You may leave." What? This is my client," Greg sputtered. "You're fired," Rousseau said simply. "As of this moment, Sullivan and Cromwell no longer represents any part of my organization. Security will see you out." Greg was speechless. 2 of the restaurant's security staff were suddenly at his elbow. He was escorted out, protesting the entire way. Henry Rousseau turned back to Serafina. He poured her a glass of water. "So, Mrs. Shaw, or may I say Ms. Navarro, tell me about Navarro Systems, and tell me what you need from me to be free of that. That was 3 months ago. That was the night her escape plan became a declaration of war. Henry didn't save her. He just provided the exit vehicle. She had already built the engine. Back in the present, Gregory Shaw stood on the wet pavement, a human statue of disbelief. The name Rousseau echoed in his head. Rousseau Energetics, the firm's whale, the client that paid for half the bonuses on his floor. He watched the Koenigsegg merge into traffic. He saw Arthur Klein approaching him, umbrella in hand. "Sir, are you—" "He fired me," Greg whispered. "At Per Se. 3 months ago. He fired me." "What, sir? That's impossible. We're still handling the—" Arthur stopped. "The Zurich merger. Oh my God. He didn't fire Sullivan and Cromwell. He fired you. He put you on a do not contact list. The partners. They've been handling the account without you. They sidelined you." The humiliation was a physical blow. The partners had known. They'd known he'd lost the firm's biggest client and had just worked around him. They'd let him wallow in his arrogant little divorce drama while they handled the real business. He was nothing. "And her," Greg hissed, pointing at the departed car. "What was that, Mr. Shaw?" Arthur looked deeply uncomfortable. "That mousy lawyer, Ms. Chen, I ran a final check on her after the signing. I should have done it sooner. She's not a divorce lawyer. She's the lead counsel for intellectual property at Rousseau Energetics European Division." Greg's blood ran cold. She works for him." "It appears so, sir. And that lump sum payment, the one we thought was so generous." Arthur pulled out his phone. The bank transfer just cleared. It was routed from her account as stipulated. "Good," Greg snarled. "She's already spending it." "No, sir. It was routed from her account. And to a charity. The Tucson Home for Battered Women. The entire sum. She just gave it away." Greg didn't understand. "But then she has nothing. Why would—" "Gregory?" The voice was a bark. Greg turned. Striding out of the lobby, his face a mask of thunder, was Robert Sullivan, the founding partner, the man whose name was on the door. He was flanked by 2 security guards. "Mr. Sullivan, sir, I was just—" "You're a fool, Shaw," Sullivan spat. "A blind, arrogant fool. Sir, I just got off the phone with Henry Rousseau. He called me personally, as a courtesy, to let me know that his new CTO was enjoying her first day of freedom." CTO? Greg's mind was failing to connect the dots. "Chief Technology Officer." "Yes, Shaw. And do you know who his new CTO is?" Greg's face went white. He knew. He just didn't want to believe it. "Serafina Navarro." Sullivan said, his voice dripping with contempt. "And Navarro Systems, the little AI company she've been running out of your guest room for 2 years. The one Rousseau just merged with." Sullivan shoved a tablet into Greg's chest. Greg looked down. It was a Financial Times alert which had just hit the wires from Zurich. Rousseau Energetics announces strategic merger with Navarro Systems to launch Phoenix AI, a revolution in quantum-based predictive modeling. Greg's eyes scanned the text, his vision blurring. "The deal," Sullivan said, his voice low and dangerous, "is valued at $2.8 billion. Greg dropped the tablet. It clattered on the marble floor. Billion. Your wife. Gregory, your ex-wife, is now the second largest shareholder in the combined entity and the head of all R&D. Her personal stake is estimated at just under $800 million. And you just signed a divorce decree that explicitly waives any and all claims to her past, present, and future business holdings in exchange for a one-time payment, a payment she just donated to charity." Greg's knees buckled. "She played you," Sullivan hissed. "She played all of us. And in doing so, you've made this firm look like a collective of idiots. You didn't just lose your wife, Greg. You lost the single biggest tech deal of the decade, which she built under your roof. You're a laughingstock. Mr. Sullivan, Robert, You're out. Your access is revoked. These gentlemen will escort you to your office to collect your personal effects. And only those. Your partnership is dissolved. You can't, Greg shrieked, the sound high and pathetic. I built the... You built nothing, Sullivan roared, causing the entire lobby to fall silent. You were a liability we were managing. Now you're a mess we have to clean up. Get him out of my sight. The security guards took Greg by each arm. As they dragged him limp and protesting toward the service elevator, he caught the eye of the doorman, Patrick. The doorman wasn't smiling. He just watched Greg with a look of quiet, profound pity. Greg Shaw. The man who had ruled this building was dragged out the back like common trash, his own arrogant laughter still echoing in his ears. The jet was a Gulfstream G700, and it sliced through the upper atmosphere at just under the speed of sound. The silence inside the cabin was absolute, a pressurized, serene cocoon that muffled the roar of the twin Rolls-Royce engines. It was less an aircraft and more a high-tech corner office in the sky, upholstered in cream leather and brushed graphite. Serafina had changed in the private stateroom. The beige costume of Mrs. Gregory Shaw was crumpled in a bag destined for an incinerator. She now wore a sharp, comfortable-looking Acris pantsuit in a deep indigo. Her hair was down and she was sipping a cup of rare, high-mountain oolong tea. She stared out the curved window, watching the New York skyline, a dark, glittering scar, recede behind them. Henry sat across from her, his own laptop open. He hadn't spoken much, simply observing her with a look of profound clinical interest. He was a man who respected data and the data in front of him. This woman, who had operated under the nose of one of New York's most arrogant men for years, was the most fascinating set he'd ever encountered. So, Henry finally said, a small, genuine smile playing on his lips. The taxi money. Serafina laughed. It was a real warm, unrestrained sound. It felt foreign and wonderful in her own throat. It felt appropriate, the final donation from the Gregory Shaw Charity Fund, whether he knew it or not. He knows now, Henry said. He didn't show her his phone. He simply nodded to her own, which sat on the polished table. The press release hit the wires 30 seconds after we were wheels up. I imagine your phone is... busy. She picked up the device. Her personal phone, the one Greg knew about. It was exploding. A cascade of missed calls and texts from every person she'd ever known in New York. Her old friends from the Garden Club. Reporters from the Times and the Wall Street Journal. And of course a long, scrolling, apoplectic waterfall of texts from Greg. Her finger hovered over his name. She tapped it. The screen filled with his escalating panic. Sarah. Where are you? What is this? The GM doorman said you left with Rousseau. Is this a joke? Sullivan is calling me? What the hell is going on? A merger. Navarro Systems, $800 million. Sarah, you can't do this to me. That's my money. That is marital asset. I'm calling my lawyer. We are still married. That signature is void. You lied to me. This is fraud. You will be in jail. Sarah, please, you don't understand. This is too big for you. You need me to manage this. I can protect you. I'll fire Tiffany. I swear to God. Just come back. We can have it all, you bitch. You greedy, stupid, ungrateful bitch. You ruined me. The final message had come in just 2 minutes ago. I will destroy you. Serafina read them all, her face impassive. The man who had called her weak and unstable was having a complete psychotic break, all via text. She turned the phone off and set it down the screen, going black. He'll fight it, she said, her voice quiet. It wasn't a question. He'll file a motion to vacate the judgment based on fraud. He'll claim I hid assets. He will? Henry agreed, taking a sip of water. And he will lose, spectacularly. But I did hide assets. Serafina stated, looking him in the eye. Yes, but he signed. And Ms. Chen, Henry said, his smile returning, is, as I believe you know, one of the most brilliant legal minds in Europe. While Arthur Klein was busy drafting memos about your emotional instability and your inability to manage finances, Ms. Chen was building a firewall. He leaned forward. Greg's entire case will be based on New York state law. He'll claim a right to marital assets. But here's the beauty of it, Sarah. What assets? Navarro Systems, she began. Navarro Systems was a Delaware shell company, yes, but its parent company, the entity that holds every single patent for the Phoenix Protocol, is a Swiss Société Anonyme registered in Zurich. The patents themselves were filed with the European Patent Office, not the USPTO. Henry continued, while you were depressed, you were also, according to Swiss government records, establishing a primary residence. Your household allowance for the last 6 months, Ms. Chen used it to lease a corporate apartment in Geneva in your name. Your 2 spa trips to Switzerland. You were meeting with bankers and lawyers. As of this morning, your legal residence is not New York. It's Geneva. Your U.S.-based assets at the time of signing were precisely 0. Serafina's eyes widened. She had known the plan, but hearing him lay it out so clean and sharp was staggering. He can't claim marital assets in a New York court from a Swiss resident whose entire net worth is tied up in a European corporation. He has no jurisdiction. He has no claim. The agreement he signed, the one his own lawyer drafted, explicitly waives any and all claims to your past, present, and future business holdings in exchange for that one-time payment. A payment you've already donated. He's boxed in. He has, as you so perfectly put it, nothing. Serafina let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 15 years. You thought of everything, she whispered. No, Henry said, his expression softening, his voice losing its boardroom edge. You did. You built the Phoenix Protocol. You built the legend of S. Navarro. You engineered this entire performance. You just needed a legal firewall. I just provided the bricks. He raised his glass of water in a toast. To Navarro Systems. Serafina smiled, picking up her teacup. To Phoenix AI, she corrected gently. She looked out the window at the deep dark blue of the stratosphere at the first hint of the curve of the earth. She thought of Greg standing on that wet sidewalk, his world collapsing. She thought of his laugh. She felt a brief, sharp pang. It was so intense it took her breath away. A single hot tear escaped her eye and tracked down her cheek. Henry saw it. He didn't say anything, didn't try to comfort her. He just waited, giving her the respect of her own moment. Serafina wiped it away, her hand perfectly steady. It wasn't a tear of pity. It wasn't regret. It was a tear for time. 15 years. 15 years she had let that man dim her light, convince her that her only value was as an accessory to his life. 15 years of hiding her mind. The tear was a final punctuation mark. The end of the chapter. She turned back to Henry, her eyes clear, bright, and utterly focused. The cold, brilliant mind of S. Navarro was fully in control. It's just, she said, her voice clear as a bell, I'm so ready to get to work. Henry Rousseau looked at his new chief technology officer, the most brilliant mind he had ever met, and he gave her a true unguarded smile. Welcome home, Ms. Navarro. 6 months later. The scent of stale beer and industrial disinfectant hung thick in the air. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and O'Malley's, a dim sports bar on the Upper West Side, was populated by men with nowhere else to be. Gregory Shaw was one of them. He was a ghost of the man who had signed those papers. His $3,000 Brioni suit was gone, replaced by an ill-fitting, off-the-rack department store jacket rumpled from being slept in. His face was puffy, his eyes bloodshot. The Patek Philippe was gone, sold for pennies on the dollar to pay the first of many legal retainers. He had fought. Oh, he had fought. The moment the Financial Times article hit, he had been on the phone with Arthur Klein, screaming, threatening, demanding. He'd filed the motion to vacate the judgment, citing gross and intentional fraudulent concealment of marital assets. It had been a slaughter. Ms. Chen, no longer mousy, had appeared via video link from Zurich. She hadn't just argued, she had systematically dismantled him. She presented the Swiss residency, the European patents, the signed agreement drafted by his team that explicitly waived all claims to any past, present, and future business holdings. The judge, an experienced woman from the New York County Supreme Court, hadn't just dismissed his motion. She'd dismissed it with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. She had in her ruling called his legal action frivolous, vindictive, and a profound waste of the court's time. The humiliation was total. Sullivan and Cromwell had disbarred him for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty to the firm. The penthouse was gone, seized by creditors, who it turned out held liens on nearly everything Greg owned. Tiffany had vanished the moment the Amex Black Card was declined. He was toxic. Now he nursed a warm Coors Light, his eyes staring blankly at an old baseball game on one of the many screens. He glanced up at the one TV that wasn't playing sports. It was CNBC broadcasting live. The chyron read, "Live from Davos, the future of AI." And there she was. Gregory froze his glass halfway to his lips. It was Serafina. But it was not his Serafina. This woman was luminous. She wore a striking deep blue Roland Mouret dress that was both powerful and elegant. Her dark hair was no longer in a severe drab bun. It was cut in a sharp modern bob that framed her face. Her eyes, which he had mistaken for dull, were bright, alive, and fiercely intelligent. She was on a panel seated between the CEO of a German tech giant and a U.S. cabinet secretary. She was not, as Gregory had always insisted, letting the men talk. She was commanding the conversation. The model isn't just predictive. She was saying, her voice crisp and passionate, her hands moving to emphasize her point. It's prescriptive. Anyone can build an algorithm to see a problem. Phoenix AI anticipates the cascading failures. When the Texas grid was 90 seconds from a multi-state collapse last month, it didn't just sound an alarm. It actively rerouted 10 gigawatts of power through 3 separate secured subgrids. It's not analysis, it's a solution. The anchor, a man Greg recognized as a major financial media figure, turned to her, his expression one of clear admiration. "Ms. Navarro, you are the story of the decade. 6 months ago, no one knew your name. Now you're the architect of the new energy revolution. What's your secret?" Serafina smiled a calm, camera-ready, billion-dollar smile. "There's no secret," she said, her voice carrying across the quiet, dirty bar. "I just finally stopped letting someone else write my story. I decided to pick up the pen myself." The camera panned slightly. Beside her, just out of the main shot, sat Henry Rousseau. He wasn't looking at the camera. He wasn't looking at the moderator. He was looking at Serafina, and on his face, a man notorious for his cold, unreadable expression, was a look of pure, unadulterated admiration. In the bar, Greg stared at the screen. He saw the woman he had called weak, the woman he had called unstable, the woman he had called stupid, the woman he had laughed at. He didn't hear the TV anymore. All he could hear echoing in his own skull was his own voice from that 50th floor conference room. That dry, arrogant, dismissive laugh. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Serafina." A wordless animal sound of pure, unadulterated rage tore itself from his throat. He roared and hurled his glass at the television. The glass shattered against the screen right on Serafina's smiling, triumphant face. The image flickered and went dark. The bar went silent. Every eye turned to him. The bartender, a burly man with a thick neck, pointed a beefy finger. "Out! Get out! Now!" Gregory was grabbed by the arm and shoved bodily out the door. He stumbled, falling hard onto the cold, dirty sidewalk of Amsterdam Avenue. He was left alone in the gray afternoon with nothing but the ringing in his ears, the smell of garbage from a nearby alley, and the ghost of his own stupid, arrogant laughter. And just like that, Serafina Navarro proved that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's thriving beyond your oppressor's wildest imagination. Gregory Shaw thought he was closing a book, but he just set her free to write an epic. Her story is a powerful reminder never ever underestimate the person sitting quietly next to you. They might not just be in a different chapter. They might be writing a completely different and far more brilliant book. What did you think of Serafina's incredible comeback? Was Greg's downfall satisfying enough? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. And if you love stories of ultimate revenge and empowerment, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who needs to hear it and smash that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. You won't want to miss a single story we have for you.
Have you ever wondered what happens when the person who threw you away is forced to watch you shine? Imagine being told you're not good enough, that you're the anchor weighing someone down only for them to sail away on a sea of arrogance with their new perfect partner. This is the story of Chloe, a woman left with nothing but the echoes of her ex-husband's cruelty. He flaunted his glittering new life, making sure she saw every triumphant post, every expensive gift, every smug smile. But he made one colossal mistake. In his desperate need to prove he'd upgraded, he never once thought to look at the quiet, unassuming man who began to pick up the pieces of Chloe's heart. He was about to learn in the most public and humiliating way possible that the man holding his ex-wife's hand wasn't just a rebound, he was a billionaire. The silence in Chloe's apartment was a physical presence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a hollow, cavernous one, a constant reminder of the life that had been violently scooped out. Just 6 months ago, this small one-bedroom apartment would have been a temporary stop, a place to laugh about, before moving into the sprawling suburban house she and Ethan had been saving for. Now it was her entire world. The floral print sofa was a hand-me-down from her aunt, the coffee table was a lucky find on the curb, and the rent was a monthly panic attack. Her marriage hadn't ended with a whisper. It had imploded like a dying star. Ethan, with his perfectly coiffed hair, his bespoke suits, and his insatiable ambition, had sat her down on their beige leather couch, the one he'd insisted they couldn't really afford, but was essential for projecting success, and delivered a monologue that felt rehearsed. Chloe, we're on different paths, he'd said, avoiding her eyes by straightening his tie. I'm rocketing forward and you're content. You've become comfortable. It's holding me back. I need a partner who challenges me, who runs at my pace. The words were corporate speak for, you're not good enough anymore. The real reason, she discovered a week later on Instagram, was named Sophia. Sophia Hayes was everything Chloe wasn't. She was 10 years younger, a leggy blonde with a trust fund, a penchant for designer hashtags, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was the perfect accessory for the life Ethan craved. The divorce was swift and brutal. Ethan's lawyer, a shark in a pinstripe suit, argued that Chloe hadn't contributed equally to the marriage's financial assets, conveniently ignoring the years she'd worked 2 jobs to support him through his MBA. She had supported his dreams, managed their home, and been his cheerleader, all while he climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious investment firm, Sterling and Finch. In the end, she walked away with a pittance, her dignity in tatters, and a profound sense of worthlessness. Ethan, it seemed, was not content with simply leaving her. He seemed intent on grinding her face in his newfound happiness. His social media was a curated highlight reel of his spectacular new life. Pictures of him and Sophia in Bali, captioned, "Finally breathing free." A video of the custom diamond engagement ring. He'd bought her a stone so large it looked gaudy. When you know, you know. Upgraded, the caption read. Each post was a meticulously crafted dagger aimed directly at her heart. Their friends, or rather his friends, quickly chose sides, liking and commenting with fawning praise. Today was a particularly bad day. Chloe was scrolling through her phone during a meager lunch break at her new job, a data entry position that was as mind-numbing as it was low-paying, when a post from Ethan's sister Jessica popped up. It was a photo from the engagement party. The event was held at the Vistano, a rooftop venue with panoramic city views that cost more for one night than Chloe earned in 6 months. Ethan was in a tailored tuxedo, a triumphant smirk on his face, his arm possessively around Sophia, who was poured into a shimmering gold dress. Chloe's thumb hovered over the image. She knew she should look away, but it was like probing a sore tooth. In the background, she could see faces she once considered family, all beaming, celebrating the erasure of her from their lives. The caption written by Jessica was the final twist of the knife. So thrilled to finally have a sister who inspires my brother to be his best self. Welcome to the family, Sophia. A hot, shameful tear slid down Chloe's cheek, splashing onto her phone screen. She quickly wiped it away, her face flushing as she glanced around the bleak office break room. She felt pathetic. Why was she still letting him have this power over her? The worst part was the public humiliation. A few weeks ago, she'd been forced to go to the downtown mall to buy new cheap work blouses. As she was leaving, she heard a voice call her name, a voice that made every muscle in her body tense. "Chloe, fancy seeing you here." It was Ethan, and of course, Sophia was clinging to his arm, looking Chloe up and down with an expression of mild pity. Sophia was holding a shopping bag from Valentino, while Chloe clutched her plastic bag from a discount department store. "Ethan!" "Sophia." Chloe managed her voice tight. "Just picking up a few things for our trip to Monaco," Ethan said, gesturing vaguely with his free hand, which sported a new, ridiculously expensive-looking watch. "You know how it is. The Grand Prix. You wouldn't believe the yacht we've chartered." He didn't want to have a conversation. He wanted an audience. He wanted to perform his success for her. "That's nice," Chloe said, her eyes fixed on a spot over his shoulder. Sophia gave a little laugh, a tinkling sound that grated on Chloe's nerves. "Oh, Ethan, don't bore her with our plans." "Chloe, darling," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "I just have to say that's a very practical blouse you've got there. It's so brave of you to be so sensible with fashion." The insult was so perfectly delivered, so sweetly venomous, that Chloe was left speechless. She felt small, drab, and utterly insignificant next to this glittering, polished couple. "We have to run," Ethan said, his smile widening. "Reservations at L'Etoile. Take care of yourself, Chloe. Try to get back on your feet." He patted her arm in a gesture of faux sympathy before steering Sophia away. As they walked off, Chloe could hear Sophia's whisper, deliberately pitched to carry back to her, "God, that was depressing. You really did trade up, baby." Chloe stood frozen for a full minute, her cheap plastic bag digging into her palm. She didn't cry. Not there. She waited until she was locked in her car, the engine off, and then she let out a strangled sob that felt like it had been ripped from her soul. He hadn't just left her. He was actively trying to destroy what little was left of her. He needed her to be miserable to validate his own choices. That evening she deleted her Instagram account, vowing to shut him out for good. But the damage was done. His voice, his words, Sophia's pitying gaze, they lived rent-free in her head, a constant tormenting loop of her own failure. Cutting Ethan out of her digital life was one thing. Cutting him out of her psyche was another. The first few weeks were a battle against the phantom limb of her old life. She'd wake up reaching for his side of the bed, or start to tell him about her day before the silence reminded her she was alone. The data entry job was a soul-crushing exercise in monotony, a beige cubicle that felt more like a cage. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. One rainy Saturday, wandering aimlessly through a part of town she rarely visited, she stumbled upon a small, unassuming shop tucked between a trendy coffee bar and a laundromat. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "The Last Page Bookstore." Peering through the window, she saw towering shelves of books, cozy-looking armchairs, and the warm golden glow of reading lamps. It looked like a sanctuary. On a whim, she pushed open the heavy wooden door, a small bell chiming her arrival. The air inside smelled of old paper leather and brewed tea. It was the most comforting scent she had encountered in months. An elderly woman with kind eyes and a cascade of white hair looked up from behind a massive oak counter. "Welcome," she said with a gentle smile. "Take your time. Let me know if you need anything, dear." Chloe spent over an hour wandering the narrow aisles, her fingers ghosting over the spines of worn classics and forgotten histories. It was here, surrounded by the quiet wisdom of 1,000 stories, that she felt the tight knot of anxiety in her chest finally begin to loosen. This place felt real, a world away from Ethan's glossy, superficial existence. She became a regular. Every weekend, she would buy a cup of tea from the pot the owner Mrs. Gable always had brewing and lose herself for a few hours. One afternoon, as Chloe was paying for a worn copy of Jane Eyre, she noticed a "Help Wanted" sign taped to the counter. "You're looking for help?" Chloe asked, her heart giving an unexpected flutter. "Oh yes," Mrs. Gable sighed. "My old bones aren't what they used to be. It's just part-time, mind you. Shelving inventory, helping customers. Doesn't pay much." "I'll take it," Chloe said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. The pay was less than her data entry job, but the thought of spending her days in this peaceful haven felt like a lifeline. Working at the Last Page was transformative. The methodical task of sorting and shelving books was meditative. She loved helping people find the perfect story, seeing their faces light up with discovery. For the first time since the divorce, she felt a sense of purpose, however small. She was building something new, a life that was entirely her own, even if it was a quiet one. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, about a month into her new job, that she met him. He was tall, with a quiet intensity about him. He wore simple, well-worn jeans, a plain grey t-shirt, and a pair of glasses that gave him a thoughtful, almost scholarly look. His brown hair was a little unruly, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He didn't browse like most customers who drifted aimlessly. He moved with a quiet purpose, heading directly for the non-fiction section, specifically the shelves dedicated to theoretical physics and computational science. He came in every Tuesday and Friday like clockwork. He'd spend an hour or so in his preferred section, pull out 2 or 3 dense academic-looking books, and bring them to the counter. He was always polite, but reserved. "Find everything you were looking for?" Chloe would ask her standard customer service line. "I believe so." "Thank you," he would reply, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. He paid in cash, never made small talk, and would give her a brief, shy smile before leaving. Chloe found herself intrigued. He was an enigma. He dressed like a graduate student, but the books he read were at a post-doctoral level. There was a stillness about him, a sense of deep thought that she found captivating. She learned his name from his special orders, Liam. Just Liam. No last name provided. He'd occasionally request obscure scientific journals or out-of-print textbooks, and Chloe took a secret pleasure in hunting them down for him. One rainy Friday, Liam came to the counter with his usual stack of books. As he was pulling out his wallet, a massive clap of thunder shook the entire building, and the lights flickered and died, plunging the store into the gloomy grey of the storm outside. "Oh dear," Mrs. Gable called from the back room. "The old generator must have failed again." Chloe fumbled under the counter for the emergency candles. Her hands were shaking slightly in the sudden darkness. "Here, allow me," a calm voice said beside her. Liam had pulled out his phone, its flashlight cutting a clean, bright beam through the dark. He held it steady for her as she lit a few candles, their warm glow pushing back the shadows. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little breathless. She looked up and met his eyes in the flickering candlelight. For the first time, his gaze wasn't distant or preoccupied. It was focused directly on her, and she saw a surprising warmth in their deep brown depths. "No problem," he said, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. "Looks like we're stuck for a bit." "It seems so. The power on this block can be temperamental." They stood in an unexpectedly comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the drumming of the rain against the window and the crackle of the candle wicks. "You really love these books, don't you?" Liam asked, gesturing to the shelves around them. "I do," Chloe admitted. "It's quiet in here. The stories feel more real than the world outside sometimes." "I know what you mean," he said, his smile lingering. "They're more logical, at least." He nodded towards his own stack of books on the counter. "Cause and effect. Provable theorems. It's cleaner than people." The observation was so unexpectedly poignant that Chloe laughed, a real unforced laugh. That's one way to put it. The power flickered back on as suddenly as it had gone out. The harsh fluorescent lights felt intrusive after the soft candlelight. The moment of connection was broken. Liam blinked, as if coming out of a trance. "Well," he said, clearing his throat and suddenly seeming shy again, "I should let you get back to it." He paid for his books and turned to leave. "Liam," Chloe called out, emboldened by their brief exchange. He paused at the door, turning back. "Thank you," she said simply. "For the light." He gave her another one of those small, rare smiles. "Anytime, Chloe." He left the bell chiming his departure. Chloe stood at the counter, a faint smile on her own face. It was the first time he'd used her name. It was a small thing, but in her small, quiet life, it felt like a seismic shift. The rainy afternoon in the bookstore became a quiet turning point. The formal barrier between Chloe the bookseller and Liam the customer had dissolved. Their brief conversations at the counter began to lengthen. He started asking her about the books she was reading, and he listened, truly listened to her opinions, his head tilted with genuine interest. She learned that his work was in software development, a vague term that she accepted without question. He described it as solving complex puzzles, which seemed to fit the man who read books on quantum mechanics for fun. One sunny Saturday, as she was closing up the shop, Liam was waiting outside, leaning against the brick wall. "I was wondering," he started, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "if you'd let me buy you a coffee, as a thank you for tracking down that book on string theory." Chloe's heart did a little flip. "I'd like that." Their first date was at the trendy coffee shop next door to the bookstore, a place Chloe had always felt too intimidated to enter. But with Liam, it felt different. They sat for 2 hours, the conversation flowing with an ease that stunned her. He was surprisingly funny with a dry, self-deprecating wit. She found herself telling him about her dream of one day opening her own small business, perhaps an online shop for artisanal crafts, a passion she had long suppressed. He didn't dismiss it as a silly hobby as Ethan would have. Instead, his eyes lit up. "You should do it," he said with conviction. "You have a great eye for detail and a passion for it. That's the foundation of any successful venture." His belief in her was a balm to her wounded self-esteem. Their coffee dates became a weekly ritual, then evolved into walks in the park, visits to art museums, and eventually dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. Liam's life seemed as simple as hers. He lived in a modest apartment across town, drove an unremarkable sedan, and his favorite thing to do was cook dinner together at her place, experimenting with new recipes. He was the polar opposite of Ethan. Where Ethan was loud, Liam was quiet. Where Ethan craved the spotlight, Liam seemed to actively shun it. He never talked about money or status. Their connection was built in a world of shared ideas, quiet moments, and mutual respect. With him, Chloe felt seen not as an accessory or a stepping stone, but as herself. The ghosts of her past began to fade, replaced by the quiet warmth of a hopeful future. Meanwhile, Ethan and Sophia continued their campaign of performative bliss. One evening, Chloe made the mistake of reactivating her Facebook account, thinking she was strong enough to handle it. The very first post on her feed was from Sophia. It was a professional photo shoot of the two of them captioned, "Counting down the days until I get to marry the most ambitious, successful man I know. Power couple. Future Mrs. Hamilton." Ethan in the photo looked directly at the camera with an air of smug satisfaction that turned Chloe's stomach. The real-life encounters were worse. Chloe and Liam were leaving a small, independent cinema one night when they nearly collided with Ethan and Sophia, who were clearly heading to the VIP lounge of the same theater. "Well, well, Chloe," Ethan said, his eyes sweeping over her, and then landing dismissively on Liam. "I see you're keeping busy." "Ethan." Chloe said, her voice steady. She felt Liam's hand find hers, his thumb gently rubbing her knuckles in a gesture of support. Sophia draped in a fur stole that was absurd for the mild autumn evening, gave Liam a condescending once-over. "How sweet. It's so nice that you found a friend." The emphasis on the word friend was designed to belittle. "This is Liam," Chloe said, her chin held high. Liam gave a polite, tight-lipped nod, his expression unreadable. He made no move to shake Ethan's hand. "Liam," Ethan repeated, testing the name. "Right. Well, we're off to the premiere. They're holding our seats. You two enjoy the general admission." He laughed, a short barking sound, and steered Sophia away. "Can you believe that's who she's with now?" Chloe heard him mutter to Sophia as they walked away. "Looks like he just crawled out of a university library. What a downgrade." Chloe flinched, the insult hitting its mark. She felt a familiar wave of shame wash over her. Was Ethan right? Was she settling for a quiet, unremarkable life while he continued to soar? Liam squeezed her hand, pulling her focus back to him. He was looking at her, not at the retreating couple. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "No, you're not," he said gently. "What he says doesn't matter, Chloe. He's just projecting his own insecurities onto you." "How can you be so sure?" She whispered the question, betraying her own deep-seated doubts. "Because happy people don't need to put others down to feel tall," he said simply. "Come on, let's go get some ice cream. My treat." As they walked to the ice cream parlor, Chloe studied Liam's profile. He seemed completely unfazed by the encounter. There was a core of stillness and self-assurance in him that she found herself envying. He didn't need fancy watches or VIP lounges to feel worthy. He was simply himself, and for him, that was enough. The contrast between her two worlds was stark. With Ethan, life had been a constant performance, a desperate scramble for external validation. Every dinner, every vacation, every purchase was about how it would look to others. With Liam, life was quiet, internal, and real. It was about the joy of a shared conversation, the comfort of a silent understanding, the simple pleasure of being with someone who liked you for exactly who you were. As she took her first bite of mint chocolate chip ice cream, she realized Liam was right. Ethan's world was a gilded cage built on a fragile foundation of others' opinions. Her world, the one she was slowly building with Liam, was smaller, quieter, but it was solid. It was hers. And for the first time, she truly believed it was the better of the two. The seasons turned, and the quiet rhythm of Chloe and Liam's life together became her new normal. She launched her online store, Chloe's Creations, selling handcrafted jewelry and knitted scarves. It started small, but with Liam's encouragement and surprisingly savvy advice on website optimization. "Just a little hobby of mine," he'd said. With a shrug, her orders began to grow steadily. She was even able to cut back her hours at the bookstore, pouring her energy into her own venture. Her confidence, so long dormant, began to bloom. Conversely, whispers from her old life suggested that Ethan's world was not as perfect as his social media feed suggested. One day she ran into an old acquaintance, a woman named Megan, who had always been more of a friend to Chloe than to Ethan. They stopped for a quick coffee. "You look amazing, Chloe. Truly," Megan said, her eyes warm and sincere. "You seem so peaceful." "I'm happy," Chloe replied, and the words felt true. Megan lowered her voice conspiratorially. "That's more than I can say for Mr. and Mrs. Perfect. You didn't hear it from me, but things are not all sunshine and stock options over there." "What do you mean?" Chloe asked, trying to sound indifferent. "Well, for starters, the wedding has been postponed. They're telling everyone it's because of a venue issue, but the rumor is that Ethan's big, emerging markets fund at Sterling and Finch took a massive hit. He leveraged himself to the hilt, promising huge returns, and the whole thing just tanked." Chloe listened, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. There was no joy, no schadenfreude, just a sad, weary recognition. That was Ethan always betting the farm on a risky long shot, always chasing the biggest, flashiest win. "And Sophia?" Chloe asked. Megan rolled her eyes. "Her family's money isn't as liquid as everyone thinks. She's putting a lot of pressure on him. I was at a dinner party with them a few weeks ago, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. He was making loud, obnoxious jokes, but his eyes were darting around like a cornered animal. And she kept making these little digs, mentioning a friend whose husband just bought her a yacht, or asking Ethan when his year-end bonus was going to clear. It was uncomfortable to watch. The image Megan painted was vivid. The triumphant, smirking man from the engagement photos was gone, replaced by someone stressed and desperate. His taunts toward her suddenly made more sense. He wasn't just flaunting his success. He was trying to convince himself it was real. The next encounter with Ethan confirmed it. Chloe was at a local farmer's market, picking out vegetables for a dinner she and Liam were planning. She heard his voice, before she saw him louder than necessary, performative. "Yes, of course it's organic. Sophia only eats organic," he was saying into his phone, striding through the crowd. He looked thinner, and there were dark circles under his eyes that his tan couldn't quite hide. He ended the call and spotted her. His face hardened. "Shopping for your little domestic life." He sneered, his gaze sweeping over her simple sundress and basket of produce. "Hello, Ethan," she said, calmly, refusing to take the bait. "I've been meaning to call you, actually," he said, his tone shifting to one of false sincerity. "I heard about your little online trinket shop. It's cute, a nice hobby to keep you busy." "It's a business and it's doing well, thank you," she replied evenly. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right. A business." "Look, Chloe, I felt a little guilty about how things ended. I know you're probably struggling. I'd be happy to give you a small loan, a few thousand, to help you out. Consider it a charitable donation. I'm in a position to be generous these days." The offer was so drenched in condescension, it was almost comical. He wasn't offering help. He was offering a handout to reinforce his own superiority. He needed to see her as a charity case. "Thank you for the offer, Ethan, but I don't need your money," she said, her voice firm. "I'm doing just fine on my own." His face twisted into an ugly expression. "Don't be proud, Chloe. It doesn't suit you. I know what you make at that dusty old bookstore. You can't possibly be fine. Just take the money. It would make me feel better." It was all about him. Of course it was. "No," she said, the word clear and final. "I don't want anything from you." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding. She could feel his eyes on her back, burning with frustration. His attempt to re-establish his dominance over her had failed, and he clearly wasn't used to it. Later that evening, while she and Liam were chopping vegetables in her kitchen, she told him about the encounter. He listened intently, his brow furrowed. "He offered you money?" Liam asked, pausing his dicing of an onion. "It wasn't about the money," Chloe explained. "It was about power. He needs me to be failing so he can feel like he's winning. He's a man whose entire sense of self is built on a house of cards." Liam said, his voice thoughtful. "And it sounds like a strong wind is starting to blow." He looked at her, his expression serious. "I want you to know, Chloe, if you ever did need anything, you wouldn't have to ask him. You'd only have to ask me." The offer was so different from Ethan's. It was quiet, sincere, and had no strings attached. It was an offer of partnership, not pity. "I know," she said, her heart swelling with affection. "But I'm okay. For the first time in a long time, I'm really okay." Liam was still being vague about the specifics of his own work. He'd mention late-night coding sessions or a server migration project. Once he had to cancel a date because of an unexpected investment call with the London office. Chloe didn't press. She trusted him. His life was his own, and he would share the details when he was ready. But she was starting to get the sense that his software development job might be a little more significant than he let on. The pieces didn't quite add up the depth of his knowledge, his casual references to international offices, his unwavering calm. The glass facade of the man she thought she knew was beginning to show the faintest of cracks, revealing something far more complex underneath. The first concrete sign that Liam's life was more than it appeared came on Chloe's birthday. She had insisted she didn't want a fuss, so they planned a quiet dinner at her apartment. But when Liam arrived, he wasn't carrying a bottle of wine or a takeout bag. He was holding a single, elegant black envelope. "Happy birthday," he said, his smile a little nervous. "I know you said no fuss, but just open it." Inside was a reservation confirmation, not for a restaurant, but for a weekend trip. To a private coastal retreat called Seacliff Sanctuary. Chloe had heard of it. It was a legendary, ultra-exclusive resort frequented by celebrities and tech moguls, where privacy was the ultimate luxury. A single night there cost more than her monthly salary. "Liam, this is impossible," she stammered, looking at the confirmation. "How did you get this? It's booked years in advance. And the cost." "I have a friend who has a membership." He said, his answer smooth, but his eyes watchful. "He owed me a favor. Please say you'll come. I wanted to give you a weekend where you don't have to worry about anything." She was floored, a mix of shock and a growing, deep-seated suspicion swirling inside her. A friend with a membership. It was plausible, she supposed, but it felt thin. Still, the sincerity in his eyes was undeniable. She agreed, pushing her questions to the back of her mind, deciding to just enjoy the extravagant gift. The weekend was like stepping into another reality. A sleek black car, which Liam referred to simply as a rental, picked them up. The resort was a collection of secluded villas nestled into a cliffside overlooking the ocean. Their villa was stunning, with an infinity pool, a personal chef, and breathtaking views from every window. Chloe felt a profound sense of dislocation. This world of effortless luxury was so far removed from her life of careful budgets and thrift store finds. She watched Liam, expecting to see some sign of awkwardness or awe, but he moved through the environment with a quiet, unassuming confidence, as if it were perfectly normal. He spoke to the staff with a polite, easy authority, and they responded with a level of deference that went beyond standard hospitality. They called him Mr. Sterling, a last name she had never heard him use. "They keep calling you Mr. Sterling," she said, as they sat by the pool, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Liam looked up from his book, his expression calm. "It's my mother's maiden name. I use it for reservations sometimes, for privacy." The explanation was logical, yet it felt like another piece of a puzzle she couldn't quite assemble. The questions were piling up, creating a low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of her happiness. The true moment of revelation came on their last night. They had dinner on their private terrace, the sound of the waves crashing below. Chloe was wearing a simple but elegant dress Liam had bought for her at the resort's boutique, a gift he'd insisted on. She felt beautiful, but also like she was playing a part in someone else's life. After dinner, Liam was on the phone, his back to her, looking out at the ocean. His voice was low, but she could hear the shift in his tone. The relaxed, gentle man she knew was gone, replaced by someone sharp, decisive, and authoritative. "No, the valuation is too low. We're not acquiring them for anything less than a 30% discount on their Series C. Tell them my offer is final," he said. There was a pause. "I don't care what their board says. We hold the leverage. My team at Sterling Innovations will run the due diligence. Send the revised term sheet to my legal department by morning." Sterling Innovations. The name hit Chloe like a physical blow. It wasn't just a familiar name, it was one of the biggest names in the tech world. A privately held behemoth famous for its revolutionary AI software and its mysterious, press-shy founder. A man who was famously reclusive, who hadn't been publicly photographed in nearly a decade. A man known only by his name, Liam Sterling. Her blood ran cold. She felt dizzy, as if the ground had fallen away beneath her feet. The quiet, bookish software developer who read physics textbooks and made her pasta from scratch was that Liam Sterling, the billionaire. He finished his call and turned around, a relaxed smile returning to his face as he saw her. But the smile faltered when he saw her expression. She was pale, her eyes wide with shock and a dawning sense of betrayal. "Chloe, what's wrong?" "Sterling Innovations," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You said your name was Sterling." "Liam Sterling." The name hung in the air between them. He closed his eyes for a brief second, a flicker of resignation crossing his face. The charade was over. "Yes," he said softly, his voice full of a regret she couldn't decipher. "My name is Liam Sterling. The Liam Sterling. The one who—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "Yes," he confirmed again, his gaze unwavering. "Chloe, I can explain everything." But Chloe couldn't hear him. Her mind was reeling, recontextualizing every moment they had spent together. The simple apartment, the unremarkable car, the hobby of website optimization, the friend with a membership. It had all been a lie, a carefully constructed facade. She wasn't just dating a man named Liam. She was dating a fortune, a legacy, an empire. And he had never told her. The man she had fallen in love with, the man whose quiet authenticity she had cherished as the antidote to Ethan's phoniness, was potentially the biggest phony of them all. The unlocked door hadn't led to a simple room. It had opened into a chasm, and she felt herself falling. The silence on the terrace was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic crash of the waves below. Chloe stared at Liam, the man she thought she knew, and saw a stranger who commanded boardrooms and moved markets with a single phone call. Why? The word was small, fragile, but it held the entire weight of her confusion and hurt. Why didn't you tell me? Why lie to me? I didn't lie, Chloe. Not really, Liam said, taking a tentative step toward her. I just omitted. I never said I was poor. I told you I worked in software. I do. My life, the one I shared with you, the bookstore, the quiet nights, the cooking, that's the real me. That's the life I choose. You chose to deceive me, she shot back, wrapping her arms around herself, as if to ward off a chill. You let me believe we were the same. You let me talk about my money problems, my little online store. You must have been laughing at me. Never, he said, his voice raw with sincerity. Chloe, I would never laugh at you. I admire you more than anyone I've ever met. You're building a life for yourself, from scratch, with passion and integrity. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Especially in the world I come from. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of deep stress. My name, my family's money. It changes things. It changes how people see me. They don't see Liam, the man who loves theoretical physics and burns pasta sauce. They see a walking, talking bank account, a solution to their problems, an opportunity. I've had people try to befriend me, date me all to get something. After a while, you build walls. You learn to hide. He looked at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. When I met you, you were working in a bookstore. You were kind and smart, and you had this quiet strength about you. You saw me. Just me. For the first time in a very long time, I felt normal. I was terrified that if you knew that would all disappear, that you would either run away, intimidated, or that you would change, that you would start to see the money instead of me. His words chipped away at her anger, revealing the deep hurt underneath. She had built her entire new life on a foundation of authenticity, a direct reaction to Ethan's world of smoke and mirrors. And now the one person she believed was truly genuine had been hiding the biggest secret of all. So you were testing me? She asked, her voice trembling. No, I was protecting myself, he corrected gently, and I was falling in love with you. I was scared to lose what we had. It was selfish and it was wrong. I should have told you sooner. I didn't know how. Chloe sank into a chair, the revelation too much to process. Liam Sterling, the reclusive genius. She remembered reading an article about him once, months before she'd even met him. It had called him the ghost of Silicon Valley, a man who had built an empire and then vanished from public view, disgusted by the fame and sycophancy that came with it. It all started to make a painful kind of sense. His desire for a simple life wasn't an affectation. It was a refuge. While Chloe's world was being turned upside down, Ethan's was in a state of free fall. The massive loss in his fund had become public knowledge at Sterling and Finch. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a liability. The whispers in the hallways grew louder. His superiors were reviewing his portfolio with brutal scrutiny. The lavish lifestyle he and Sophia had been living was financed almost entirely by credit and the promise of a bonus that was now never going to materialize. The postponement of the wedding became indefinite. Sophia, whose patience was directly proportional to Ethan's net worth, was becoming increasingly cold and distant. Their arguments were frequent and vicious, mostly centered on money. The Valentino bags and Monaco trips were replaced by tense dinners, where she would scroll through her phone, pointedly liking photos of her friends, more successful partners. Ethan was drowning. He spent his days trying to placate angry investors, and his nights trying to appease a fiancée who looked at him with growing contempt. He was desperate for a lifeline, a big, game-changing deal that could reverse his fortunes and restore his status. He had been chasing a meeting with one company in particular, the most innovative, most powerful player in the AI space, Sterling Innovations. He believed that securing an investment from them, or even just a partnership, would be the coup he needed to save his career. But the company was notoriously inaccessible. All his calls and emails went unanswered. The founder, Liam Sterling, was a ghost. Ethan grew obsessed seeing a meeting with Sterling as his only path to redemption. He had no idea that the very man he was desperately trying to reach was spending his evenings cooking pasta in his ex-wife's tiny apartment. Back on the terrace, Chloe finally looked up at Liam. The shock was starting to recede, replaced by a complex tapestry of emotions. "I need time, Liam," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need to think." "I understand," he said, his face etched with worry. "Take all the time you need. But please believe me, the man you fell in love with is the real me. The money is just a complicated inheritance. It's not who I am." Chloe stood up and walked back into the villa, leaving him alone with the sound of the ocean. She didn't know if she could reconcile the two Liams in her mind, the quiet book lover and the billionaire titan of industry. And she didn't know if their relationship built on a half-truth was strong enough to survive the whole one. Chloe took her time. She returned from the coastal retreat and asked Liam for a week of space a week to live with the new reality of who he was. She walked through her small apartment, tended to her growing online business, and worked her shifts at the bookstore. Everything was the same, but now it was all viewed through a new lens. Liam's simple sedan wasn't a sign of his modest means. It was a deliberate choice. His quietness wasn't just shyness. It was a shield. Slowly her perspective began to shift. Liam hadn't used his wealth to impress her or manipulate her. In fact, he had done the opposite. He had hidden it to allow for something real to grow between them. He had wanted to be loved for himself, a desire so fundamentally human that it transcended wealth. He hadn't lied about who he was, only what he had. She realized that her relationship with Ethan had been all about having the right car, the right house, the right connections. Her relationship with Liam was about being understood, being respected, being seen. At the end of the week, she called him. "Dinner. My place. You're cooking," she said, a hint of her old teasing tone returning. The relief in his voice was palpable. When he arrived, he looked as if he hadn't slept for a week. They didn't talk about the money at first. They cooked, they ate, and they fell back into their easy rhythm. It was only later, sitting on her hand-me-down sofa, that she truly confronted it. "I'm not going to lie, Liam. It's overwhelming," she said. "But I fell in love with you, not your bank account. And I need you to promise me that our life, the one we build, will always be ours. Simple. Real." "I promise," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he pulled her into his arms. "That's all I've ever wanted." A month later, Liam came to her with a request. The Sterling Innovations Foundation is hosting its annual charity gala, he explained. "It's the one event a year I have to attend. It raises millions for children's education programs. I know it's exactly the kind of thing we hate, but I need to be there, and I want you by my side. As you." Chloe hesitated. This was the world she had run from, a world of glitter and pretense. But this was Liam's world too, a part of his life she had to accept. "Okay," she said. "I'll go." Meanwhile, Ethan's desperation had reached a fever pitch. He had heard through the grapevine that the Sterling Innovations Gala was the place to be, an event where the elusive Liam Sterling himself might even make an appearance. He saw it as his last desperate chance. He begged, borrowed, and pulled every string he had left to secure 2 tickets costing him a small fortune he didn't have. "This is it, Sophia," he told her, his eyes wild with a gambler's hope. "If I can get 5 minutes with Sterling, I can turn everything around. We'll be back on top, bigger than ever." Sophia, placated by the promise of a glamorous night out and a chance to network with real money, agreed to go dusting off her most expensive gown. The night of the gala was a spectacle. The ballroom of a 5-star hotel was transformed into a fairy tale landscape. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, and the city's elite mingled their diamonds and laughter echoing through the vast space. Ethan and Sophia arrived, trying to project an aura of success they no longer possessed. Ethan scanned the crowd relentlessly, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for the man who held the key to his salvation. He schmoozed with minor executives and board members, dropping the name Sterling Innovations into every conversation, but no one could point him to the man himself. Chloe was a nervous wreck getting ready. Liam had arranged for a stylist to help her, but she chose a simple, elegant navy blue gown that made her feel confident, not costumed. When Liam saw her, he was speechless. "You look," he started, then just shook his head in awe. "You're beautiful." They arrived not through the main entrance with the flashing cameras, but through a private entrance, bypassing the red carpet. When they entered the ballroom, a hush fell over the room. Heads turned, whispers erupted. The ghost of Silicon Valley was here. And he was not alone. Chloe held Liam's arm, her knuckles white. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Just breathe. You're with me," he murmured. Ethan was on the other side of the room, trying to corner a mid-level manager, when he felt the shift in the room's atmosphere. He turned to see what the commotion was about. He saw the crowd parting, creating a path for a couple. He saw the tall man with the unruly brown hair and the quiet, powerful presence that drew every eye. He didn't recognize him at first. Then he saw the woman on his arm. It was Chloe, his mousy, unambitious, dowdy ex-wife. She was radiant, poised, looking like she belonged there more than anyone else. Ethan's brain short-circuited. It didn't make sense. What was she doing here? Who was that man? Sophia followed his gaze. "My God!" She breathed, her eyes wide. "That's him! That's Liam Sterling!" The name hit Ethan like a physical punch to the gut. He stared, his mouth agape, as the pieces violently clicked into place. The quiet guy from the cinema, the downgrade, the man he had mocked and dismissed, Liam Sterling, billionaire Liam Sterling. The blood drained from his face. He felt the eyes of everyone in the room on Sterling, and by extension on the woman at his side. The woman he had discarded. The woman he had publicly humiliated. The woman he had called a charity case just a few months ago. Liam, oblivious to Ethan's presence, leaned down and whispered something in Chloe's ear, making her laugh. It was a genuine, beautiful sound that echoed in the suddenly quiet ballroom. In that moment, Chloe looked up, and her eyes swept across the room. For a brief, heart-stopping second, her gaze met Ethan's. There was no triumph in her eyes, no pity, no anger. There was nothing. It was the look of a person gazing at a complete and utter stranger, a forgotten figure from a distant past. That look, more than any verbal insult, was what shattered him. It was the look of absolute and total indifference. He was so insignificant to her now that he didn't even register. Sophia, a creature of pure, ruthless pragmatism, saw the entire situation in an instant. She saw the catastrophic miscalculation Ethan had made. She saw the power, the real power, radiating from Chloe's new partner. And she saw that her own horse had not just lost the race, it had collapsed on the track. Without a word, she turned to Ethan, her face a mask of cold fury. "You are the biggest fool I have ever met," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. She unclipped the gaudy engagement ring from her finger, shoved it into his hand, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. Ethan stood alone, the ring digging into his palm, the weight of his colossal failure crashing down on him. He had spent a year trying to prove he had upgraded, only to discover in the most public way imaginable that it was Chloe who had done the upgrading, not in wealth but in worth. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had thrown away a diamond, convinced it was a common stone, and now the entire world was watching it sparkle in another man's light. The aftermath of the gala was swift. News of the reclusive billionaire Liam Sterling's new relationship spread like wildfire, but he fiercely shielded Chloe from the ensuing media storm. For Ethan, however, there was no protection. The story of his public humiliation became a cautionary tale, and the fragile scaffolding of his life collapsed. His fiancée was gone, his friends vanished, and his reputation was destroyed. Within 2 weeks he was fired from Sterling and Finch, and the creditors he had been ignoring came to collect. The luxury car, the penthouse, it all disappeared, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of his own arrogance. Hitting rock bottom, Ethan was driven by a desperate need for answers. He found Chloe at the Last Page bookstore, looking more at peace than he had ever seen her. He was a wreck. His expensive suit wrinkled his face, unshaven. "Was it all a plan?" he demanded, his voice raspy. "Did you know who he was? Was this all some elaborate revenge?" Chloe looked at him, not with anger or triumph, but with a sad, distant pity. "No, Ethan, I had no idea," she said, her voice calm and steady. "And you need to understand this. My life isn't about you anymore. You didn't ruin my life, and I didn't ruin yours. You built a world of smoke and mirrors, and it was blown away. I'm sorry for the pain you're in, but I can't help you." Her indifference was his true punishment. She had moved so far beyond him that he couldn't touch her, not even with his accusations. Defeated, he turned and left the bookstore, the bell chiming his final pathetic exit from her life. Chloe's world, in contrast, continued to blossom. She and Liam built a life that blended their two realities, one filled with quiet, simple moments, backed by the resources to enact real change. Chloe's handcrafted jewelry business, Chloe's Creations, flourished, her success entirely her own. Together, she and Liam used his fortune not for yachts and galas, but to fund educational charities, finding a shared purpose far more valuable than any stock portfolio. Chloe had discovered the ultimate truth. Her real fortune wasn't Liam's money, but the unshakable confidence she had built from the ashes of her old life. It was the love of a man who saw her not what she could do for him. It was the quiet, profound peace of knowing that true wealth is never about what you show the world, but about the value you find within yourself. And so Chloe's story isn't just about a woman finding love with a billionaire. It's about a woman finding herself. It's a powerful reminder that our worth is never defined by the people who leave us, but by the strength we discover in picking up the pieces. Ethan's world of superficial success was a fragile illusion that shattered under the first sign of pressure. Chloe, on the other hand, built her new life on a foundation of authenticity, kindness, and self-respect, a foundation that turned out to be unbreakable. This story shows us that the best revenge isn't loud and dramatic, but quiet and profound. It's the simple, undeniable truth of a life well lived. What did you think of Chloe's journey? Did Ethan get the karma he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of resilience and unexpected love, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a reminder that their best chapters are still to come. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of karma drama and ultimate triumph. Thank you for listening.